Will Lowery, welcome into the game in Tuscaloosa, man. I hope all is well.
Hey, great to be talking with you, Ryan. Great to be back. It's been a while.
Absolutely. We're going to talk a little college football, but what would be if you were going through Saban camp tomorrow and you were starting at 2:30 in triple digits, what would be the mindset on the eve of practice getting underway?
Oh, man, a lot of things going through your mind. Getting settled into the comforts of Bryant Hall and probably sitting in the training room down on some salt tablets is where I'd be at.
What does it take to get through that? I mean, we always talk about, and maybe we don't really understand it, but the grind, just the mental side of it, not the physical side, but the mental side of to get through this grind of this heat and sort of having to dig a little bit deeper to find out what you're made of.
Yeah, it's every bit as much mental as it is physical. It's a long couple weeks. There's a lot that goes into it, and first you want to have the confidence that you prepared yourself physically the right way throughout the summer. Giving your all in the summer conditioning and do well in the conditioning test leading into it. And as long as you've done that, you've got a good mindset. You've been putting in the work. Should be ready to go. But absolutely, it's every bit as much mental. I mean, it's just such a grind. It's just there's no break. You basically live, eat, sleep, breathe football for a few weeks in a row, and you don't get away from it. You go back to the dorms, and you're just with your teammates, and you wake up, go back to the film room, you're eating in the mess halls, and it's just constant football the whole time. And it certainly wears on guys. It's definitely a way that some guys are able to set themselves apart. It was one way where I was able to have a little bit of an advantage. There's some guys that can sustain and push through, and there's some guys that don't do it as well, and it's, you really find out who's got that winning mentality, that extra edge there towards the end of camp when everybody's really beat down, and you find out who's pushing through it. And it's just a great atmosphere. It's really a great time for the team to come together, gel together, spend time together, really become closer, and find your identity and start to form that as you lead into the season.
You've been on teams who had the mindset to win the national title. I don't want to say this the wrong way, so I'm going to try to tiptoe around it. But you've been on teams that did not meet the expectations. 2010. Could you tell that in fall camp? I mean, can you tell when you feel good about yourself and the sort of the hunger of the players around you? I mean, could you feel that? Maybe that, I don't know if entitlement's the word, but I'm looking for something in 2010. Maybe you can help me out a little bit as far as.
It's a tough question, Ryan. I mean, I've wondered that myself. In retrospect, it's easy to say. It's easy to say, well, we had a bunch of guys that were getting ready to go into the draft, and a lot of guys that were trying to boost their last bit of personal profile before they went into that draft, because obviously, every spot is just millions of dollars, and it just means so much to so many guys. But at the same time, back then, no, I didn't see it at the time. I mean, you still feel like everybody's working hard. It's every team is a human team. You have ups, you have downs, you have struggles, you have times when you're low, times you're not practicing well. And so it's all a multitude of emotions and mentalities and kind of trying to get it all figured out, and you never do. It's when you look back and you're a championship team, yeah, obviously it all worked out, and then there are some times like 2010, like we're talking about, where it doesn't. But at the same time, it's still just a play here, a play there, a handful of plays throughout the course of the season that decide if you're a champion or not. And I would say it's tough to say because, like I say, it's a game of inches, and obviously in 2010 we were on the wrong side of that. But no, I mean, I wouldn't say looking back that I knew during that time that we would fall short. I thought everybody was doing the things they needed to do. Sure, like I say, we had some tough times. Sometimes we weren't doing as well as we thought we should have, but we had those times in 2011 too. So it's pretty tough to tell. Every team I was on at Alabama, or really on period, you expect to win every game. We expected to win every game we played in the upcoming season, and we tried to practice that way, but sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't. But fortunately, it worked out the majority of the time for us while I was there.
I want to pick your brain about some general college football things. From a defensive mindset, I feel this is a a good person to sort of pick the brain of the defensive side of the football. You played for Nick Saban. You understand the philosophy that he has on that side of the football. We'll go back to Alabama in a couple of minutes, and maybe you can give us some insight on the quarterback situation or just talk about what Nick Saban's looking for. But before we do that, I want to go to general college football, and I want to talk about a defensive back because I've complained about this throughout the rule committee that was voted back in the spring. The rule did not pass, but the officials who we have spoken to, Steve Shaw, is somebody that we recognize. He's the director of officials for the SEC, and he said that we're gonna have this conversation. And I want to focus on offensive line reads from a defensive back and a linebacker's perspective. The ineligible lineman downfield. The rule is set at 3 yards. If you're not engaged beyond 3 yards, it should be a penalty. We're not calling that in college football. That's the reason why it came up this past spring. Let me ask you, as a defensive mind, talk about the importance of reading offensive linemen and how big of a trick is that to know whether it's a passing play or a running play. And then you can also even throw in the ineligible lineman downfield and something that's going to be closely watched, I believe, this upcoming year.
Yeah, it's a tough thing to do, and it takes experience, I think, more than anything. And I was fortunate. We actually, we were pretty advanced, I guess, for a high school level at Hoover. We were reading linemen back then. Old Vestavia Hills has got the bob sweep left and the bob sweep right, which is about 50% of their plays. So we spent a good time reading the tackle and kind of the pop motion on a pass set as opposed to the forward drive on a run. And it comes with experience. It's tough to do. I don't think that corners do it very much. And when they do, I don't think they're very good at it for the most part just because of that lack of experience. But from a safety position, I mean, it's very important. Especially at Alabama, you're playing a lot of single high, a lot of man free. You got to be reading those uncovered linemen, the end guys on the line, really give you the best read. And I think it's a lot harder now than it used to be because as that's become more relevant to the game, to the modern game, the offense has adapted to that. I mean, the game's changed a lot in the last couple of years, even since I played, in terms of what offenses are doing, what they're running, what they're trying to do, their strategy behind it, the hurry-up stuff, all this different run-pass conflict stuff. It's really tough to read. And I think that it's good that they're focusing on that rule, to try and give it some more definition or they're at least paying attention to it. But I try not to get into the rule stuff too much because I just get frustrated. I think that for the most part they try and protect the offenses and because the average fan just likes to see points on the board and big spectacular plays. So I try not to dive too much into the rule stuff, but I am glad they're paying attention to it. But I think it's a struggle, and hopefully our guys in the secondary are. We've got some guys coming back. Hopefully we've got enough guys that are starting to get enough experience to where that kind of stuff is a little more natural for them, and they're getting a better feel, and they'll be able to read it a little quicker. So I guess time will tell for our guys.
We're talking to Will Lowery right now, former player at the University of Alabama, walked out of Tuscaloosa with a lot of jewelry. I want to go back to, is defense as important in college football? Because I think you touched on it a couple seconds ago. Is it as important as what it was when you were playing here just a few years ago in college football as a whole?
Absolutely. I don't think that, obviously as a defensive guy, I'm biased, but I think that the phrase, offense wins games, defense wins championships, all that stuff, I buy into that. I always did. I think it's if you can stop the guy in front of you, then you can't lose. If you can keep him from scoring, then you can't lose at the very minimum. So I think it's every bit as important, if not more important, because of the focus on offense and the change in strategy and the change in, what they're trying to do to score points, to trick the defense, to get them, to get their guys, to get the advantage of men where the ball is and blockers and stuff like that. I don't think that drops off. I don't think the defense drops off in importance at all. I think it's, like I say, more important than ever. It's just so tough nowadays with the different things that offenses are doing. And like we're talking about, the run-pass conflicts, the pop pass, the jump pass, that kind of stuff. It's just really tough to read and stop. But, we've given up a lot more points in the last couple of years, I think in part due to that. And Coach Saban and Coach Smart and those guys kind of trying to adjust to these changes in strategy. But there's no better guys in the business at getting better and adapting to different changes in offensive strategy and scheme than those guys. I mean, Saban's been doing it for years. I mean, it's funny sitting in a meeting with him. He'll be spitting out plays and terminology, and sometimes he'll get words mixed up with calls that he used to make 10 years ago, and he doesn't even notice it. Where some guys will be like, what was he talking about? So they spend their whole off season going through stuff like that and trying to come up with new ways to stop them. So it's an interesting game of chess, but absolutely, I think it's every bit as important as it used to be.
Nick Saban is one of the things that he has said throughout the offense, or on the defensive side of the football as we continue throughout the offseason, when he says that, I'm an NFL guy, I'm an old guy. In other words, we would have specialists, on 3rd and 7 or 3rd and 3, then you would bring in personnel to match what you think they're going to do offensively. He was talking about substitutions. Now they don't have time to do that, and that's really changed the way that they recruit. Just sort of look at it from your perspective as Nick Saban getting those calls in and Kirby Smart making those adjustments. You don't have time like you did maybe even a few years ago to get those calls in from the sideline. Sometimes you have to count on those players to make those decisions.
Yeah, and you're right on it. I mean, when it comes down to it, Coach Saban is a control freak. He, like you say, he's used to putting his team in the best personnel matchup-wise and in the best call situation-wise to win the down and ultimately win the game. And he's been very, very, very good at that over the years. And I think that the no-huddle does exactly like you're saying. It just takes out the ability to influence the game as much as he has in the past, forces him to keep kind of a core group of guys out there and forces guys to have more well-rounded abilities as opposed to specialist abilities. And that's something that they're going to have to acclimate and adapt to. And like we're talking about, they're doing that. So I have faith that they've been putting in the work and the studying on how to figure these things out. But absolutely, I mean, that's exactly what it does. It just takes away Coach Saban and other coaches' abilities to influence the game directly. It puts the game more in the players' hands, which is more interesting, or interesting in its own right. It's interesting to see those guys try and have to take on more of a load. And man, I bless their hearts. I can only imagine the amount of preparation they're having to do each week because, from a defensive perspective, you practice, X amount of different plays, formations, personnels during the week for any given game. And when you get to the game, you see about probably 15 to 20% of what you actually practiced. So it's really tough to get in all that preparation and to be sharp on across the board on it because you don't know what 15 to 20% that you practiced you're actually going to see that week in the game. So I can only imagine the variety of stuff that they're trying to get in and get through. I'm sure it's driving them crazy.
Will, let's go back to the quarterback situation. What's Nick Saban looking for in a QB?
As much as the quarterback position has been scrutinized the last couple of years, I think that most people are honestly pretty on top of it. He's been pretty honest about it. I think he's really looking for somebody to just take charge, take the reins, take command, and lead the team. It's when you've got a couple guys that are kind of neck and neck or close and not really neither one of them sticking out, it's kind of tough. And, you really just want to see somebody come and take a hold of it and claim it with their play and their attitude and their leadership as opposed to, more the idea of a coach just pointing and naming someone, the quarterback and the leader of the team. And from what I'm hearing, it's Coker's job to lose. I mean, he's been here, he's been learning, he's been doing pretty well. I think he's been progressing. And when he was at Florida State, Coach Pruitt, who was here at Alabama and then went to Florida State as the DC and now at Georgia in the same position. I remember talking with him and was kind of asking him about Coker when he first transferred over. And he told me that the coaching staff was actually split right down the middle on right before the season. I mean, a couple weeks before they started, the coaching staff was split right down the middle on who they wanted to start between Coker and Jameis Winston because he said that they were just so similar in ability. Both running and throwing the ball, and he said that they ended up giving the edge to Winston just because apparently I think they thought that Coker was a little bit, or should I say, Jameis was a little bit quicker of a decision maker in the pocket, a little more decisive, and that ended up ultimately giving him the edge. But for the most part, they were pretty much neck and neck up until they named Winston the starter. So that alone, comparing him to the number one pick in this last year's draft, shows you the kind of ability that he has and the talent that he possesses. So hopefully that translates. Hopefully he's been able to pick up the system well enough and get comfortable with his teammates, his receivers, his offense well enough to this point to where he can really kind of take charge here in camp. I mean, it's only a few weeks, but it seems like an eternity from a player's perspective, and hopefully he's really able to take some strides here in the next couple weeks and stake his claim in that position, and I think that's what he'll do.
When you're in a battle, when you've been in these competition battles, how hard is it not to press? And what I'm saying is try to force things. In other words, you want to stand out from the guys that you're competing with, but you also don't want to make those mistakes. Because I go back to the 15 days of spring practice, I saw some quarterbacks pressing, and that's what you want, but you also don't want the mistakes. How hard is that to sort of control yourself and just play within your limits?
It's tough. Defensive back and quarterback, completely different positions. From a defensive perspective, the main focus that you want to be giving yourself, and I was just watching Hard Knocks from the Falcons a couple summers ago, and Matt Ryan was sitting in the quarterback room telling one of the receivers the same thing. It's just you got to be responsible for your job. That's it. You don't worry about anybody else on the field, and as long as all 11 players on the field do their job, then the team is going to have success. And that's all you can focus on. I tried to do that when I played, and those are the guys that have the most success. When you start worrying about trying to do too much or trying to push, that's when you start making mistakes. At the quarterback position and the defensive back position, those are probably the two positions on the field that when you make a mistake, it's the most evident, and there's not really anybody else to blame but yourself, and everyone in the stadium knows it. So hopefully our guys don't get too into that. They need to play within themselves. They need to, from the quarterback position, take what the defense gives you. You need to make your reads, and take the open guy or make the right check. You don't want to force things, because when you do, that's when you turn the ball over, and that's the quickest thing that'll get you in bad position and losing games from an offensive perspective.
Nick Saban has talked about returning to the identity that made them successful, winning championships. It's so funny to listen to Nick Saban. I know it's 12-2, but that's not the standard at Alabama. SEC champion is great, nothing disrespectful about that, but when you set the bar and the ceiling at winning national titles, you have Nick Saban even says, we got to get back to the identity after winning 12 games and winning the SEC championship. What does that mean to you, returning to the identity?
I think that I wouldn't have it any other way. From a player perspective, from a coaching perspective, from a fan perspective, from any perspective, if you support the team or in any capacity, and really anything you do, I think from a winner's mentality, you want to expect the best. You want to expect the absolute utmost out of everyone around you, out of yourself, out of the team. And I think that I would be disappointed if he was expecting anything less. I'm glad that he's taken that approach. And getting back to that old mentality, I think, is just good old classic Alabama, Nick Saban, blue collar. It's outwork every other team in the country in camp right now. It's out-tough them. It's, win the fourth quarter in practice, win the last drill, win every drill, do everything you can, push yourself to the absolute limit for these next couple weeks, as I know they have been all summer, so that by the time this season rolls around, there's not a doubt in your eye or the guy you're playing that, you both know that the guy in the Crimson, the guys in Crimson are the toughest guys on the field, the most conditioned, the most well-prepared, just across the board. They just have that edge, and that championship mentality comes along with that.
Will, give us an update on what you're doing there in Mobile. We've got a lot of people listening to us via the internet from Lower Alabama that could benefit. Tell us what you're up to these days down in Mobile, and I believe it's Spanish Fort, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, we're office in Spanish Fort, living in Daphne, though. My wife Marlo and I are just down here keeping our nose on the grindstone, just working hard and still settling in together and enjoying Baldwin County. Work for a real estate development company. We got a brokerage and home building company, Truland Homes and Bellator Real Estate. Just trying to get from A to B, man. Ready for some football season, ready to enjoy the game, ready for some cooler weather, ready to watch the Tide roll.